Okay, we're now officially good to go. I think we are streaming, which is good. We're still working on the Elassomorph, and let's see. Today we are going to work with yellow ochre. So we're saying that our learning intentions really are, let's see, our learning intentions are to identify the yellow ochre color, and our success criteria, if we have them. Yep, be able to name yellow ochre and to use it. Maybe not just yellow ochre, but to see what actually, what happens when we use it in combination with other colours. But here we are in the classroom. So let's create some space. You can see over here we have the mixing palette. That's great. We've got the Elassomorph that we're working on right now. So let's remind ourselves where we've come from. Last session, which was yesterday, we put down some French ultramarine blue, this dark colour here, and at the same time we put down some cerulean blue hue. Now of the two of them, I can touch this one, although it's cool to the touch. I can sense that it's well on the way to drying. But this isn't, it's a little bit slower, so I'll have to make a note of that. There's a little bit of residue on my finger to show that there is, some workability still in the paint. It hasn't dried or it hasn't oxidized completely in the time. But this French ultramarine blue is well on the way, and either surface could be worked on right now. However, the plan today is to try and bring in this branch with yellow ochre. Definitely bring in the palette here. And to do that, we're going to use yellow ochre, either on its own or maybe even in combination with some other colours. But let's just wait and see. Yellow ochre is an earth colour, and it's one that I use quite a lot. It's very similar to raw sienna, first glances, first appearance. They are very, very similar. But of the two of them, side by side, you can see that raw sienna is nudging orange a little bit more, whereas yellow ochre is slightly more muted, more dull, and that's okay. We can use that. It's going to be the ideal base for what we do next. Okay. There we go. Today I'm going to use a little bit of thinner. Ideally, I should have a dropper for that so I can map out just exactly what I want to use. And today I'm going to use these brushes. Again, they're Rosemary, Rosemary and Co, Ivory, a short flat, a 0, and a 1. There we go. Just drag some of this in. Now, heavily diluted. Heavily diluted. You can see its yellow characteristic there. Yellow. Now, I know that I'm going to change this part here to black. So this bit here that I'm painting yellow ochre right now, I know is going to be black, so that's going to be covered over. But you can see how pale that is. And if you look at the guitar in this earlier work, this is heavily diluted yellow ochre here. And it's got a very, very pale colour to it. And it was good for suggesting the soundboard here of this guitar is also yellow ochre. It suggests a kind of spruce top as opposed to a cedar top, which would be more reddish. However, we need a thicker application of yellow ochre for the work that I'm going to do today. Okay. I think I might just turn this around to make it a little bit easier. Okay, there we go. A little bit easier for me to manipulate. Okay. Now with these being short brushes, they're actually quite firm. So here goes. Oh yeah, even that could be a lot stronger. It has a fairly sharp edge to it, so it's very good for getting up to a line and dragging in a very kind of square shape. Another way to approach the line would be, instead of running parallel to the contour that you wish to address, what you can do is what I'm about to do right now, is go up to it at right angles and pull away. But this painting, I think, is going to develop in such a way that certainly with this branch here, the branch that I'm painting right now, is going to be covered with plants that grow on other plants. I think they're called epiphytes because they eat their food on top of other plants that eat their food too. And so if I don't respect the contour, if I go outside the line, it doesn't really matter because I'm looking for a kind of organic feel to the branch anyway. But the chances are I'm going to introduce some other kind of organic material to it. Just a little experiment here, putting the paint on in curves that suggest the form of the branch itself. That's okay. Now, all I'm doing with these Elassomorphs is getting painting practice for myself, but you're just time inside the studio. But I am learning as I go along that, you know, different combinations kind of suit me. For instance, I really like the way that the yellow ochre works alongside the cerulean blue hue. So that's quite a nice discovery. Okay. So we've already gone over our learning intentions and our success criteria, and there isn't really a lot to say beyond that. I could tell you things about yellow ochre, which are beyond the learning intentions that I've kind of pointed out. And one of them is that yellow ochre is an earth colour that is very good for mixing skin tones. So it's really good. Got to be careful as I come up to this upper bout of the guitar on this side. Okay, that's fine. This French ultramarine under my hand here is dry enough for me to rest on it enough. But what I don't want to do is disturb that layer. So I got distracted. I was telling you about yellow ochre being a base colour for skin tones, and that's actually going to be useful when we get to paint this eyeball here. We'll try and introduce some, you know, proper skin tones. Try and make those skin tones look realistic. And the other thing that I could say about yellow ochre is that it's one of the key colours in a famously limited palette belonging to the artist Anders Zorn. And Zorn just used black and white, yellow ochre, and some sort of red. Now I believe that the red that he used was vermilion. I'm going to correct. Do I need to correct that part? I'm going to correct this part here. Okay, just smooth the branch out a little bit. Okay. Even although I'm going to put these, you know, plant materials on it like mosses and things dripping off it. I still want the line to be sort of fairly correct. So Anders Zorn used this very limited palette to paint very beautiful realistic paintings. And so his palette has become identified as the Zorn palette. So yellow ochre is very much a feature of that palette. It's a key component. And now this is getting tricky. I'm actually beginning to miss my rigor brushes. Now, I really do like those brushes. But this flat is lovely. I'm also noticing that at this dilution, the yellow ochre seems to be very opaque, and it seems to be completely obscuring or obfuscating the black underneath it. You would expect there to be no problems with the white paint being obscured. That's okay. But yeah, that's a really nice realization that it's covering up the black as well. Okay. Okay, that is looking quite happy. Unlike popular opinion, I do not map out every part of my painting. It's not all planned. Certainly the drawing stage is a product of the unconscious mind. Some people say the subconscious, but when you're speaking about Freud never actually used the term subconscious. He always spoke about the unconscious mind. So this drawing was derived from the unconscious mind by doodling in a sort of daydream state and just seeing what happens. Well, it's made up, isn't it? It's made up as you go along. So today I hadn't set out with any kind of plan other than to do the branch and the palette with this yellow ochre, which seems to have quite a nice, it's got a kind of orangey base on top of this staining that we put, and also in combination with other colours. Like beside this cerulean blue hue, it's got the appearance of being much more orangey. So that's another thing about paints. Paints kind of change their characteristics according to the company that they keep. And so, yeah, I didn't really plan to do this bit in yellow ochre, but I'm just enjoying seeing the reaction between the yellow ochre and the cerulean blue. It's actually quite, it appeals to me. So it gives the yellow ochre a kind of orangey, kind of mustard colour. Something I haven't spoken about is the way that I'm working at the moment. I'm just blocking in. And the blocking in that I do is wet paint. I'm working wet on dry. So as you can see, I've got wet paint, but I'm working on a dried or almost dried surface. So that is known as wet on dry. That's quite understandable. It's very easy to understand that definition. So part of the reason for me doing this is again got to do with my condition. I have, oh, this becomes a problem here because I've got the yellow of the branch meeting the yellow of that background now, but that will be altered. To help me to see it, I may scratch in a little bit of sgraffito, and that'll help me remind myself that that's there. So yeah, with ME, I say that I only have about 3 good hours of energy, and the rest of it is sort of bad energy. So by that I mean uh, I've only got about 3 hours in which I can do things that are, I can achieve a result before I get exhausted. And so I have paced myself so that I can continue to do these really enjoyable painting sessions. So if you knew that you only had 3 hours good energy, what would you do? What would you expend it on? So I choose now to focus on my artwork. I kind of lost the drawing there. I've forgotten what it was I was trying to do. And I've also changed the direction of an outline so that I break the picture plane there. There we go. See, the palette is actually going off the picture plane and out of it, out of the picture plane. And now I realise that the palette comes in between these flowers. I'm going to concentrate while I do this. Okay. I really feel that I need the rigor brush. And I feel I need to change the direction of that curve. Just ever so slightly. Okay. Yeah, so I have used the yellow ochre before as a base. And if we look at this one here, yellow ochre was the base, and then burnt umber on top to try and darken it and to dull it down for that one there. So you can see how it's been dulled. Actually resembles the stain that we put on. And in this one here, actually the lightest portions were scraped right back to the original stain, but you can see some orange portions there which are the yellow ochre coming through. So I'm going to continue with the zero brush, and I'm going to try and work on the palette area. As you can see it, create more space. Okay, hopefully you can see that. So yeah, I'm just thinking that sometimes an artwork can originate from your unconscious mind, and then your conscious moments can be spent trying to work out, just what on earth it all means. So And I have to counter that by asking, is it, does it have to mean anything? So we're listening to music, and music doesn't have the same kind of pressures on it to say, well, what does that music mean? We just enjoy the music and the sounds that we hear. So why can't we just enjoy the colours that we experience and the shapes? And we just enjoy them in their own right. So yeah, I was speaking about this originating from the unconscious mind, and then the conscious mind having to, resolve it or try and figure it all out. Well, I don't actually know what, what to call this shape which has emerged here, but my conscious mind is thinking that the guitar, has grown up and out into a bird of paradise. So that's what I'm going for, bird of paradise. So, and the palette is coming around here and into the eye area. So this area here. Okay, I get a chance to correct this portion beside this eyelash. Okay, and that just again proves how opaque the yellow ochre is. The other thing I'm noticing is that this line here through to the palette means that there has to be a correction here. Okay, and there you can see why yellow ochre is so good, because even sitting with that blue, it's really wanting to make a nice kind of green. Okay, so I've kind of stopped that by putting extra, really loading up the brush and putting extra material on. So the other thing that is true about me live streaming my art studio practice is, because of my ME, is that I'm not going to waste any time on editing. So if there's any, corrections that need to be done, I'm not going to waste time editing. Like, I know that my rigor brushes are downstairs, and that I'm going to leave here to go and get them. So that's not going to be edited out, because I have to save my energy. Oh. Okay, that time is now. Enjoy the music and study the painting at leisure. the brushes than I need. Now yesterday I spoke about some of the paints being a little bit more tacky. Some of it is to do with old age, because I haven't used these paints for such a long time. But also, sometimes the paint itself, the pigments and the binder used just go together to make a fairly stubborn paint. And I can't remember where I read it, but I think there is a connection between yellow ochre and titanium white, and the titanium white was a little bit stubborn as well. So I could be wrong, that one might be worth researching. But certainly that would explain why it's so opaque at reasonable dilution. Okay, I'll drop in a little bit more inky paint there, and then between the toes of the hummingbird, I'll pick up a little bit more. That's tricky. It's gotten tricky now. Thing is, I can always reinstate the toes, so they can be put in. But the gap here is a little bit more precise. Wow, didn't plan that very well. Okay. Now, because I've flooded this area, I'm kind of removing material and depositing it elsewhere just to thin it out. But if you haven't tried water mixable oils, they are a treat. I'm not noticing any problems with breathing in fumes from the paint. So my room is fairly big. The studio room is fairly big. But if I'd wanted to, you could just, leave the window open. But in terms of ventilation, in this room here, which is about 14 by 12 foot, there's no real ventilation. The door's open, I'm sitting near two windows which are shut. There's no ventilation problem. For me, there's no real issue with odour of the paints. Okay. Yeah, they're turning out to be just a joy to work with. And this project is just kind of emerged out of play with the other kind of Elassomorphs. Now, change the direction, go that way. If I imagine the drawing, that becomes plausible there. That's fine. If you're watching this at all and you're in the UK, then one place that you can get your supplies from is the saa.co.uk. I'm not sponsored by them. It's just they have a big selection and they deliver to your door. And in the current climate of the COVID world that we live in, people are used to ordering online and having deliveries. So the SAA have these supplies. The brushes that I use are Rosemary and Co. So that a search for that on the internet will reveal where they are, and they of course deliver to your door. Wow, this drawing's gotten quite complicated now. Around about here. I think that comes there. Okay. Okay, I think that line is obstructed by the direction of one of the petals. And now what I'm trying to do is just smooth out the line of the thumb hole of that palette. And I believe, without consulting the original drawing, that petal is there. Wow, that was quite intricate. Nice. Not in the result, but just the sensation of achieving control in the space, measure of control. But also knowing that even if corrections are needed, you can just layer this paint on top of itself with apparently no problems. Now what is going to become difficult later on is putting the grain on the wood, because those lines will have to travel, be visible and then obscured, visible then obscured, pretty much like this one here. If you've seen the grain effect on this one, then its passage in front of and behind various different elements is going to be tricky to pull off. So that's going to be a bit of a challenge. Okay, I'm not sure how long this session has gone on for yet, but just we kind of get lost in the passage of time. Some next steps for me that I'm making is the fact that these flowers that I've created have just come out of my imagination, really. So I think what it would be nice to do is, if these works develop, if I continue to paint in this style, try that I begin to try and include flower forms that are based upon reality. So, and I've already begun to start thinking about it in that way, because when I get onto this bit here, this bird of paradise, then some changes are going to be made to make it take the form of a bird of paradise. But in the meantime, I'm just really enjoying the sensation of moving this paint about on the surface. I'm considering getting a daisy palette for my paints I most commonly use. Okay. Now, something that I must observe to be true to my unconscious work is that that hole is there. So even when I begin to paint or try to paint a believable bird of paradise flower, I feel that I ought to incorporate this element in it, because that was a feature of the unconscious drawing. Okay. Now the palette goes there, all the way down to the eyeball. I suppose I could have made this easier for me by painting on the eyelashes last of all, but I take a kind of weird satisfaction in trying to be neat and observing these lines that I've made. Colouring within the space seems to be the thing. Yeah, it's for me an enjoyable part of it. It takes a bit of patience, I suppose. But this isn't the first time that I've referred to the fact that while you're doing, you can't be thinking about any other worries or things that may be happening. And so it's a nice distraction. And one I would estimate is good for mental health, because it provides an element of mindfulness moment, and also it's nice to get respite from thought patterns which may not be the most I'm trying to think of the way to put it. Yeah, just get you out of your normal way of thinking about things, your inner monologue. I just know that when I'm painting, I'm just not really concerned about anything else. And I suppose if you're painting from your imagination, as I'm doing, you're kind of exploring uncharted world. Mm. Now, I am live streaming this, but if I wasn't, I'd be the first person to be seeing this kind of territory, which is a nice thought that you're bringing in, something new into the world, irrespective of what merits people might assign to it, or you might assign to it yourself. Um, if it wasn't for you, this thing wouldn't be brought into existence. So I kind of hope that anybody listening into this, or maybe even following this, might learn to value the contribution creativity makes in them, but also that their creativity makes in the world, really. Because a new work's been created. Okay. Next payday, note to self, get a mal stick. And make these tricky passages a little bit more easy. Okay. I'm feeling uncomfortable there because I don't want to interfere with the previous work. Having said that, with practice, I do notice that I'm becoming a little bit more casual because the process is now being rehearsed so many times that I am gaining confidence in my ability to do it and to predict what will happen in the hand-eye coordination that I have. So I think I'm learning to trust myself, but also to know that, again, with oils, all this is fixable. It's all fixable. So maybe we should celebrate mistakes, if we call them mistakes. Maybe we should celebrate them because they give us the chance to do the thing, to do more of the thing that we love doing. I think I'm going to change this line to come in here and to round to this part here. Okay. This is less inky and more syrupy, this mix. I think partly because, even although it's thinned, it is having a chance to oxidize and kind of thicken on the um, mixing palette. To re-establish the curve of that leaf. Okay. But if I'm not successful this time, I'll definitely get it next time when I go in with leaf colours for these. Well, I thought they were a ginger, but they're some kind of bromeliad. Okay, and are there other areas? Yes, there are. So that looks like an area there between the leaves and between the leaves there. And the palette might be going there.
Measles and whooping cough are on the rise. Vaccinations can help prevent them. Are your child's up to date? Find out more. Search NHS vaccinations.
Did you hear the check voices? Always chatting about checking when you need to be somewhere else. Did you refill the cat tray? Did you leave your Wolfman onesie on the bed when the window cleaner could see it? You didn't leave your laptop on the roof of the car, did you? You did, didn't you? It's always best to check. Check your pensions and investments are protected too, with the Financial Services Compensation Scheme. Search FSCS Check.
So what I did there was I just dabbed to make a little pool, and so now with shorter strokes rather than a long continuous line, I can nudge the paint slowly into the contour that I'm seeking. Okay. Slight dabbing.
Now listen again. Here at SSE Energy Services, our customer service agents are trained to really listen. So if your hands are full, we'll see if you prefer to talk via web chat.
Every dog has a tail to tell. So for pet insurance policies as unique as they are, visit petsinthepickle.co.uk.
Auto Express magazine are calling it 2021's coolest SUV. We call it your new Vauxhall Rigor. Its revolutionary design makes it impossible to ignore. But it's not just the coolest SUV, it's also one of the most advanced. Take the advanced park assist. Not only will it not provide you a parking space, it also takes out all the stress by steering you in. That's intelligent and eye-catching.
I'm having to concentrate quite hard here because this is a difficult little negative space. And the curious thing about it all is I am not the neatest person in my private life. No. So it's curious that my artistic alter ego is one that at the moment is trying to be neat. But we can choose to paint in a variety of different styles according to our artistic intention. But I do wonder that a lot of surreal work, which is based upon the dream world, is rendered in such realistic and accurate fashion, like the paintings of Magritte and Rousseau are very much the works of realism. So it makes me wonder that they did that to give their dreams reality, depth, substance, believability. Oh, well, that's interesting. So, okay. So there's a bit in the original drawing which comes out here. Which means that this line can be corrected even more to include that. And there we are. That is yellow ochre for us. Okay, so that will permit us to glaze on top, so we can darken this down and nudge it in so many different directions. But if I take this right now, there's a lot of wet there. So if I take that right now and pull in some, hopefully some blue, French ultramarine blue, you can see how quickly it goes towards a believable green. That's quite nice. It's quite a nice green. So let's try it there. As a stain. Yep. That's a believable green. Similarly, if you mix it with black, you get a very nice. You get a very nice green. So I'll try it with the cerulean blue hue. Oh, wow. Yeah, that's nice. Okay, it's nudging turquoise, and if I bring it in there, okay, I can see how those colours could be used, you know, either in the green of the hummingbird or in the foliage here. I'm picking out some areas. Let's try it there. Oh yeah, it's very nice. So that's it. Yellow ochre must be appearing very, very orange against my screen. Let's try this. That is it for this session. Thank you so much for viewing with me. I hope again it's given you inspiration and encouragement to continue with your own artwork. Let's revise what we did before. Let's look at the standby. Yep, Elassomorph. According to my notes, this is our studio session 6, and we're looking at yellow ochre. If we look at our learning intentions, we were trying to identify yellow ochre, and I think we can. We can see that yellow ochre goes very, very nicely with the blues that were picked out before. At least I think so. As a base colour, it can be nudged into other directions. You can say that about You could say that about all paints, you can nudge them in different directions. But for the work that I want to do on this Elassomorph, I'm looking at the previous artworks that have been completed in this style. The yellow ochre can be nudged, ever so gently into, quite interesting combinations of colours that seem to go together. Our learning intention, yep, let's look at our success criteria, if we can. Our success criteria: name yellow ochre, yep, and use it. Well, we looked at yellow ochre, we also looked at raw umber, and we saw that raw umber was an even redder, even more orange bias in raw umber. But this yellow ochre is very nice, and we spoke about it as being a good basis for skin tones. Let's go back to the demo class. Here we are. If we can. Yep. I'm quite happy with the work that has been achieved today. And again, I'd like to thank you for spending time in my company, and I hope it has proved useful to encourage your own creativity. Okay, thanks now. See you in the next one. Bye bye.